The first thing you're going to do is kind of jack it up and get it under the jack stand. That's after you broke the lugs loose while it was on the ground. Then you're going to go ahead and remove your wheel cover, take your lug nuts off, and pull your tire off. If it's stuck on there, you might have to hit it around with the rubber mallet a little. So you're going to go ahead and pull the tire off. Go ahead and take your tire off and just wheel it over out of the way. Make sure you don't lose your lug nuts. Trick to getting the tires off, if they're stuck on there, is just give them a big kick down at the bottom or hit them with the rubber mallet. And usually a couple kicks will pop them right off. We're going to be doing rotors and pads today. We're not going to be doing the caliper, but the caliper does have to come off. This is your caliper. Caliper has to come off because that's what's holding your pads on. And the caliper bracket's actually going to have to come off too because that's what's holding your rotor on, along with these two just little placement screws. So hopefully these aren't rusted on there too bad. The rotor does look pretty rusty. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is go ahead and unbolt the caliper. These two slide pins, you just unbolt those. I went ahead and I removed these two bolts. They're metric bolts. I just used a 1/2-inch socket though. That was located right here. Then again down here, and now this caliper should just in theory slide off. Might have to use a little force. When you pull the caliper off, just go ahead and place it up somewhere, maybe bungee cord it down so that the brake line right here doesn't get damaged. You can see there's the pads, just remember how they went together. There's a caliper. We're going to have to compress the piston, but go ahead and do that in a second. Go ahead and remove these two springs right here on your pads. Those should just pull right out, as so. Place those to the side. I'm going to go ahead and slide your old brake pads out, and there's just these little metal retaining clips, and they should just kind of slide right out of them. And just go ahead and pull them out. Once one side comes out, it's usually pretty easy. The other side comes right out. As you can see, these pads are pretty worn. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process on the back. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this caliper housing. It's held on with two bolts. They're going to be on there pretty good. It's kind of hard to see in here, but there's a bolt here, and then there's another bolt right down here. And I'm using an 11/16 socket. Once again, you could use metric. And I'm using a breaker bar because they are going to be on there pretty good. Once that's unbolted, just go ahead and pull it right on off. What we need to do now is compress this piston in the brake caliper. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our old pads. We're going to throw that pad right on top of the piston. And you're going to take a C-clamp and you're going to get it on like that, and you're just going to tighten it until that piston goes all the way in. So I just tightened the C-clamp all the way. As you can see, my brake pad is flush and the piston is now flush. So now when we have our new pads, since they're going to be much fatter than these really worn out pads, it's going to be able to fit them. So I actually ended up having to drill out the heads of the screws on the rotors. The screws are actually pointless. They're used in the factory to hold the rotor to the hub assembly so that while that's before the caliper's on. But you really don't need the screws because the tire and the caliper hold the rotor on perfectly fine. So I will not be replacing the screws. You can choose to replace the screws if you want to, but you're going to run into the same problem down the road. Here's my new rotor. I'm going to go ahead and slide it onto the hub assembly. You are going to want to spray this with some brake cleaner. Your hands have grease and stuff on them. And as well, when it comes from the factory, they put anti-rust stuff on there. And it's not good for the brake system. So just make sure you spray them clean. So we're just going to go ahead and fit that onto the hub assembly now. We're going to go ahead and put this caliper housing back on and bolt it back up using those two 11/16 bolts. You might want to also lubricate and clean these clips that hold your pads. So we're going to go ahead and bolt that up now. Now what I did is just kind of snap the pads back in, put your springs back on, and take your caliper and just slide it over this. Your springs are going to be pushing your pads out, so unless your clips are real tight, you got to kind of keep them pushed in there while you slide that caliper over it. You got to have the caliper slid back over. What you're going to go ahead and do is put your bolts here for the two slide pins. They're 1/2 inch. Even though you already sprayed it off once, go ahead and just spray it off again with some parts. Brake parts cleaner. Just go ahead and spray it off, and then we're going to go ahead and put our tire and rim back on.